The Coast Guard is always ready. To be ready, you must be in top shape, both physically and mentally. This includes recognizing and reporting traumatic brain injury, or TBI. But first, what is TBI?
The Department of Defense defines TBI as a blow or jolt to the head or a penetrating head injury that disrupts the function of the brain. It has at least one of the following clinical signs: loss or alteration of consciousness, loss of memory surrounding the injury, confusion, disorientation, or slow thinking at the time of the injury, weakness, loss of balance, change in vision or paralysis.
Over 7,000 Coast Guard members sustained a TBI between 2000 and 2012. 99.6% of these cases were not related to deployment.
Most head injuries occur as a result of contact sports, car and boat accidents, assaults, fights, and falls. Those who are at high risk are young men between the ages of 18 to 24, particularly who are performing military duties or have a history of prior concussion and/or substance abuse.
Each year, there are a reported 1.7 million civilian brain injuries in the United States. Now let's identify mild traumatic brain injury.
Mild TBI, also known as concussion, is difficult to diagnose because it's often not immediately visible.
My partner here is going to get a set of vitals to make sure that you don't need to go to the hospital or transport.
Yeah, I'm fine.
You might feel dazed, or you may not be able to think straight after a mild TBI, or you might even black out or lose consciousness for a short time. You might not recognize the extent of your injury.
Do you know what day it is? As far as what month?
June 3rd.
Transport. Are you sure you're not hurt?
Yeah, I'm fine. I gotta go to work.
Seeking health care doesn't harm your career. It's not being able to do your job because of untreated symptoms that can harm your career.
TBI is a major problem impacting our readiness. In the past decade, more than 266,000 U.S. military service members sustained a TBI. On average, the Coast Guard has over 500 TBIs each year. When these injuries go unreported, they lead to problems that may have otherwise been prevented, and we lose productivity in a service already stretched thin.
This is an important message coming from the top, that it's your duty to recognize and report traumatic brain injury symptoms. It's part of maintaining your physical and mental readiness for your mission. Reporting traumatic brain injury is just like the Coast Guard mission itself. We seek to rapidly respond in order to protect the nation, minimize impact, and recover.
Recognizing traumatic brain injury is critical. TBI can lead to long-term effects.
There has been a lot of interaction between the National Football League, military commanders, and research in terms of how to manage TBI. Just like our pro athletes, the largest barrier is getting someone off the field. We have to get our service members to understand that taking them out of the action once they suffer concussion and letting them recover is actually returning more and more people back into the field.
TBI is something that disrupts how well your brain is working. It can range from concussion to more severe injuries with bleeding within the brain or even a broken skull. You can't tell how severe an injury is or what effects it will have without a medical evaluation.
We use the acronym HEADS to help us remember the symptoms. Check for H, headaches and vomiting. E, ears ringing. A, amnesia or altered consciousness. D, double vision or dizziness. S, something feeling wrong. If you experience HEADS after a concussive event, notify your command and medical so that you can get the appropriate evaluation and treatment. TBI just doesn't affect the member, it potentially affects everyone. It's your duty to report a possible concussion because your symptoms may threaten unit safety and compromise the mission.
Hi, I'm Dr. Buenaventura.
How you doing, Doc?
Hi. Can you tell me what happened?
Got into a car accident.
Okay. All right.
My head.
All right. HS3 right, was a CAT scan of his head performed?
Yes, sir. They're right over here.
Once you seek medical attention, the medical team will assess your cognitive function and balance and any other symptoms. After a mild TBI, symptoms usually clear without medical treatment, but medical providers can prescribe medications for headaches, conduct physical or occupational therapy, or other things that can help alleviate symptoms and help you heal quicker.
If you have experienced mild TBI, you should avoid mental exertion like writing reports, caffeine or energy drinks, heavy lifting, exercising, and physical exertion, and situations in sports that increase risks of a secondary concussion.
Some of the effects of TBI include thinking problems, like difficulty remembering or concentrating, and behavioral problems such as anxiety, irritability, and depression.
And were you dazed, confused, or did you see stars immediately after the injury?
Yes, sir.
Did you pass out or black out?
Not that I remember, sir.
Coast Guard leadership responsibilities.
Commanding officers and officers in charge, or COs, ONCs, and staffs should consider the operational tempo and the actions of Coast Guard personnel exposed to repeated concussive events. COs, ONCs should consider periodic evaluation of these personnel to ensure that accumulated minor concussive events do not give rise to acute health-related problems. It's not just an individual member's decision to report TBI. It's also the supervisor's. That is why Coast Guard leaders must be well aware of individuals who have had repeated exposure to concussive events over the course of a deployment or the mission. It's a priority for Coast Guard leaders.
Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs TBI partnership.
The Department of Defense started tracking brain injuries in the 1960s with the Vietnam Head Injury Study. In 1992, Congress created the Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center, or DIVBIC, and directed us to evaluate head injury survivors, ensure appropriate treatment and care, advise family members, and study the outcomes of our work. 21 years later, we are fulfilling that mission by performing clinical research, treating service members, training civilian and military providers, and educating family members and the public about traumatic brain injury prevention and care. We work out of a national office, 11 military treatment facilities, and 5 Veterans Administration medical centers.
Briefly, the Coast Guard's new TBI policy is initiating protocols that require leadership to send service members for medical evaluation and at least 24 hours of rest recovery time if they've been exposed to a specific event where the risk of concussion is high, just like the National Football League and the Department of Defense. The benefit of this policy of taking a service member out for a short term is proven to help them stay in the field, as opposed to repeated exposure and getting so injured that they have to leave long term.
The Department of Defense instruction entitled Guidance for Management of Mild Traumatic Brain Injury or Concussion in the Deployed Setting was signed into policy in September 2012 and provides requisite standardized procedures for the management of mild traumatic brain injury, also known as concussion, in the deployed setting.
Coast Guard members and families affected by TBI should know they will receive the best treatment from our Coast Guard, Department of Defense, and Department of Veteran Affairs.
The only way to stop the stigma of TBI is to diligently report it. Our duty is to be prepared, and that's in keeping with our motto, Semper Paratus, always ready.
For further information on TBI, contact the Coast Guard's Psychological Health and Traumatic Brain Injury Program at mypsychealth@uscg.mil.